846. The death toll is 103. Recoveries is 2,430. And in Cameroon, the cases is at 12,592 cases. 313 have died, and recovery stands at 10,100. And Malawi, 1,613 cases, 17 people have died, and recovery right now stands at 317. And in Sudan, the cases right now is at 9,767. 608 people have died. Recoveries is at 4,673. Madagascar also 2,728. The death toll is 29. Recoveries is 1,078. And also in Somalia, 2,997 cases. 92 people have died in Somalia, while 1,014 others have recovered. And in Congo-Brazzaville, the cases is at 1,557. The death toll is 44. Recoveries is at 501. And the Democratic Republic of Congo, 7,411 confirmed cases. 182 people have died, and recovery so far stands at 3,184. And Rwanda, 1,105 cases. 3 people have died. 567 others have recovered. And Egypt, 75,253 cases, 3,343 deaths, and recoveries is at 20,726. And then Burundi, confirmed cases is at 100. I think that's 191. One person has died. Recoveries is at 118. And Ghana, 20,085 cases, 122 have died, 14,817 others have recovered. And in Tunisia, 1,188 cases, 50 have died, while 1,048 others have recovered. And we go to which country now? To Mozambique, 987 cases, 8 people have died, 256 others have recovered, and the total number of confirmed cases as per just a few hours when we were preparing this, but I know right now perhaps the figures have slightly gone up, and at that time there were about 452,644 cases that are being reported in the continent, and the death toll 11,015, and recoveries in Africa stands at 217,923. And of course the global statistics right now stands at 11.5 over a million cases that have been confirmed. 893 cases have died, and global recoveries right now stands at over 6.5 million people there. So every time I read these statistics, I have to catch myself. These are people who have died. These are people who are still in active treatment. These are people who have recovered, and you see the figures of the numbers of the people who have contracted COVID-19 is on the rise there. So every time I have to remind myself, these are not just statistics. These are people here whose lives others are in grave danger. So thank you so much. So now let's just turn our attention to the news making headlines across the continent, and of course we start with Kenya. And Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta has announced a phased reopening of the country amid a rising number of coronavirus infections. The president lifted travel restrictions in and out of Nairobi, Mombasa, and Mandera counties, which are some of the regions with the highest coronavirus cases. However, at around 9 to 4 nationwide curfew remains in place for a further 30 days, and places of worship will reopen with a maximum of 100 participants allowed in a service which should not last longer than an hour. The president also announced the resumption of local flights from 15th of July. International flights may resume from 1st of August, with strict COVID-19 protocols expected to be followed. Now, the president said the country would revert to a lockdown if infection rates worsen. He urged Kenyans to exercise a shared responsibility in the fight against the pandemic. Kenya so far has recorded 7,886 cases, and of course, including 160 deaths. We go to Tanzania, where Tanzania has closed almost centers designated to handle COVID-19 patients. The government said that a significant drop in the number of coronavirus infections led to closure of the treatment centers across the country. On Friday, Health Minister Umi Mwalimu said there were now only 11 centers, including private health centers, that are open. These are from 85 centers that had initially been set up across the country to isolate COVID-19 patients. And we go to South Africa, where South Africa's Education Ministry has continued with its phased reopening of schools despite the surge in coronavirus cases. And there has been coronavirus infections among learners and teachers since the resumption of classes in June. The Basic Education Minister, Angie Motsenga, said school administrators should continue following health guidelines. And we go to Ethiopia, where the deadly violence in Ethiopia that followed the killing of popular musician Hachalu Hundesha last week delayed Nile Dam talks and hampered efforts against coronavirus, the authorities now say. Water Minister Seleshi Bekele said the protest delayed the talks that were due by the beginning of last week. The negotiations among Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan to resolve the long-running dispute over Ethiopia's construction of a mega dam on the Nile River resumed on Friday. Mr. Seleshi said the health ministry's efforts against coronavirus were also affected, especially in the first half of the week, as no tests could be conducted in parts of the country affected by the violence. And we head to Ghana, where the president in Ghana, their President Nana Akufo-Addo, is now working from isolation after he went on a 14-day quarantine as a precaution, where a member of his close circle tested positive for coronavirus. It is not known whether the person who tested positive was a member of his family or staff. A government statement on Saturday said although President Akufo-Addo had tested negative, he would follow the advice of his doctors as a precautionary measure. And with 20,085 cases, Ghana is one of the worst affected countries in sub-Saharan Africa, although it has conducted far more tests than most nations in the region. The country has recorded about 122 deaths so far. And we go to Libya now, where the United Nations recognized government in Libya has condemned overnight air raids on an important airbase recapture last month from the renegade General Khalifa Haftar. The government said the attack to the Al-Watiya base was carried out by foreign air force, but did not say which country it suspected. General Haftar is backed by Russia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates. His forces say the base was used by Turkey to provide military support to the official government that provided crucial in defeating the offensive on the capital, Tripoli. And we head to Nigeria, where President Muhammadu Buhari has said the government will avenge the attack on a United Nations helicopter in which 2 people died. The president described the attack in the northeastern state of Borno as dastardly that will not go away without severe consequences, a local media has reported. A 5-year-old child is among the 2 who were killed in the attack on Saturday, attributed to insurgents in the restive northeastern region of Nigeria. The helicopter was being used to facilitate humanitarian support to civilians in the area that had been affected by violence for more than a decade. The UN has in the meantime halted humanitarian aid in the region. And we head to Malawi, where Malawi's new president Lazarus Chakwera has called off independence celebrations and further scaled back plans for Monday's formal inauguration. That was today, supposed to happen today. Both events were due to be marked by a huge jamboree in Lilongwe's football stadium. On Saturday, the president announced that the stadium's capacity would be halved to 20,000 to limit the spread of coronavirus. Now the stadium festivities have been cancelled together, with the inauguration being moved to a military barracks to be witnessed by only 100 specially invited guests. The cancellation will put a damper on the euphoria generated by the historic opposition triumph in a recent re-election after last year's fraudulent polls were overturned. And still staying with Malawi, coronavirus is spreading all over Malawi and faster than before. The country's new president, Lazarus Chakwera, said in what was billed as a special address to the nation. In a frank message, he said, things can be summed up in 5 words: Malawi we have a situation. He said that even though the country has only around 1,400 people who have tested positive, almost half of the cases came in the last 3 weeks. He added that the virus is now spreading within the community rather than coming from outside. He also said that some restrictions will be announced this week, but acknowledged that a balance had to be struck with maintaining livelihoods. And we move to Sudan, where the transitional government in Sudan has fired the police chief and his deputy days after large protests across the country as people called for greater political reforms. Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok relieved Abdel Mohamed Bashir, the Director General of Sudan's police force, of his duties, replacing him with Ez Eldin Sheikh Ali. Now, Sudan's cabinet later said in a statement that Othman Mohamed Yunus, Mr. Bashir's deputy, was also dismissed. No reasons have been given for firing both officials. But last week, Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok promised changes were on the way in a speech that was meant to reassure tens of thousands of protesters who have long list of demands. And we go to Madagascar. Now, Antananarivo returns to containment. 2 months after the easing of restrictive measures and even the reopening of schools, authorities have again decided to restrict movement in the Malagasy capital due to the spike in coronavirus cases. The measure is expected to continue until June 20th, and the conditions are strict. Only one person per household has the right to go out on the streets from 6 a.m. to noon. Until now, the measure extended until 5 p.m. Accustomed to registering dozens of cases of coronavirus per day, the Malagasy Health Authority has reported thousands of cases daily for the past 3 days, including 216 on Saturday, hundreds of cases every day, a record for the country. And of course, a total of 1,621 people are currently living with the virus on the island, with 31 serious cases, among them 23,000 people tested since the beginning of the pandemic. And we go to Cameroon, where Cameroon says it has deployed more troops in the capital Yaoundé after yet another bomb exploded, leaving at least 20 people severely wounded. No one has claimed responsibility, but it is suspected that Anglophones fighting for the creation of the English-speaking nation of Ambazonia, who escaped from prison, and people who escaped from prison a month ago, are responsible. Nasser Paul Biya, governor of the central region where Yaoundé is located, says he convened a security meeting on Friday night because there has been mounting insecurity in the capital city. He says he is calling on the clergy and traditional rulers to help bring peace back to the city. And still staying there in Cameroon, and all right, the detained leaders of the Ambazonian separatist movement on Thursday night held a secret meeting with some members of government over a possible ceasefire in the Anglophone regions. A spokesperson of the separatist leaders confirmed that leader Julius Ayuk Tabe and 9 others were taken out of their Kondegui cells to meet some members of government to discuss a possible call for a ceasefire. Julius Ayuk Tabe later confirmed the meeting on Friday, but did not reveal details of their discussions. He only stressed he continues to keep the determination for the restoration of the independence of the South and Cameroons. Now, the meeting comes following continuous pressure from the United Nations and the international community on the Yaoundé regime and the separatist fighters to call for a ceasefire as the world continues to battle with the Covid-19 pandemic. And we head to Zimbabwe, where a corruption scandal involving top government officials is threatening to derail Zimbabwe's response to the coronavirus pandemic, with donors raising concern over the alleged pilferation of millions of dollars in public funds. President Emerson Mnangagwa's government gave Dubai-based company Drugs Consult contracts worth $60 million for medical supplies to fight COVID-19. Authorities said drugs overcharged for the goods it supplied the government by more than $500,000. Now, the local representative of the company, who is close associate of one of President Mnangagwa's sons, has been charged after it emerged that Interpol was investigating the firm for money laundering after it received a $2 million payment from the Zimbabwe government. Health Minister Obadiah Moyo was also charged with criminal abuse of office for facilitating the deal, but has retained his position. And the U.S., which has given, Zimbabwe a substantial amount of money to fight the pandemic, said it had noted serious allegations of government corruption regarding the COVID-19 response. And we shall talk about this matter here in Zimbabwe. And then we go to Uganda, where the number of presidential aspirants for the Uganda 2021 elections continued to grow, despite concerns about the Electoral Commission's plan for virtual campaigns. The latest entrant, a former Army Commander Major General Mugisha Muntu, got the ticket to represent a party he recently founded after leaving the Forum for Democratic Change, that is the FDC. Others are former journalist turned preacher Joseph Kabuleta, a rabid critic of President Yoweri Museveni's government, who is also challenging in court the Electoral Commission's campaign regulations, former spy chief Lieutenant General Henry Tubukunde, Charles Romushana, a former operative at the Internal Security Organization turned political commentator, who has written to the Commission seeking clearance and guidance on gathering and legal mandated signatures for 3/3 of the country's COVID-19 regulations. All right, and we end with South Sudan, where local authorities in Jonglei State say recent cattle raids have left 5,000 people displaced in Pakir Payan of Twik East County. Now, Pakir Payan was attacked twice this week by armed youth, allegedly from the neighboring community. The two separate incidents, according to Peter Nyop, the chief administrator of Pakir Payan, have left more than 10 people dead and several others injured. The attack also led to the loss of properties, with hundreds of houses burned down by the attackers. Mr. Nyaup says an estimated 5,000 people are currently lacking shelter, food and medicines. The situation, according to the chief administrator, has deteriorated due to the floods in the area. And that is the latest from the African continent. I'm not really surprised by this situation in South Sudan because we know all right, they've been trying to President Salva Kiir just appointed a few governors the other day, about 8 of them, so perhaps some law and order shall return there in South Sudan. But the runaway insecurity there has been a matter of concern, especially when you hear reports about soldiers who are supposed to be at the cantonment sites there, leaving the site and slithering back into the community with their arms, and there's no structure in place that can make sure that these guns are returned before they go. So they go back, to the communities with these guns. So that, I don't know if it will help in solving the insecurity in South Sudan, or it will act in increasing the level of insecurity in that country. Security is something that President Salva Kiir there in South Sudan has to look at very, very seriously in South Sudan, because if the country continues with these levels of attacks, and now we hear 5,000 people have been displaced. So these are internally displaced people who can no longer sleep in their house, who can no longer continue with their normal daily lives in their villages or houses or whatever they are because of the insecurity, and they have to move, to another place that they deem to be much secure. These are just numbers that are continue to increase in terms of the internally displaced people there in South Sudan. And let's not forget about their millions of South Sudanese refugees are inside of South Sudan, in Kenya, in Uganda, and other African countries, and indeed across the globe. They're dotted all over the place. And this is something that President Salva Kiir must start looking at very, very seriously and address this issue, because we cannot continue with these attacks that make people not want to, sleep, in their homes, that people have to move now and more camps. Instead of closing these refugee camps, now we need to expand and build more tents. That shouldn't be the case there in South Sudan. But unfortunately, even since the signing of the peace deal in February, when we thought perhaps things will start coming back to normal, just slowly but surely. But instead, we've seen just things getting back worse, especially in matter security. And we've seen the inter-community fightings and unrest continue there. And this is something that President Salva Kiir has not come out as strongly. And the leaders there, the Vice President Riek Machar and the others who have the responsibility of bringing the people of South Sudan together, they don't come out and condemn these things with the strongest of terms. I've not read anywhere What I read is people have been killed, people have died. This village now we see in one area here at the Pakir Payan of Tweak East County, about 5,000 people have been displaced. These now will form a basis of internally displaced people. How does 5,000 people be displaced in the last few days, and yet the government just keeps mum and it's not addressing this matter? This matter of security, or the lack thereof, is something that President Salva Kiir should come out, and not just him, because we'll place responsibilities on his shoulder as the commander-in-chief, but we know that the army forces there in South Sudan are not unified. They were in the process of unifying the army, so there are different fractions. So now we are calling upon the leaders who are commandeering the different fractions to come out and ensure that they speak to their people and say, we have to maintain law and order. If we have to build our country, then all of us have a responsibility to come together and ensure we protect our people, But when you hear things like this, and we don't see any of this leadership coming out to condemn some of these things, then you wonder who really is behind these attacks, who does not want the other community to be in peace. And these are matters that must be addressed there in South Sudan, should the country really understand or enjoy stability, because they don't have any right now. And before I get to Tanzania and Nigeria and Zimbabwe and Tanzania, who, by the way, John Clark, thank you for watching. Now, President Magufuli has closed all the designated centers that were handling COVID-19 patients because there are no more cases in Tanzania, all right? And all centers, there are 85 centers that have been designated, so they've all been closed down, and now they're urging the Tanzanians that if you feel you're sick, you can now go to the hospitals and get treated for any other disease, because we don't have COVID-19 in Tanzania. It's very interesting. I don't know if they have also closed the center that they had at the border for the testing of the drivers and the Kenyan drivers before they got into Tanzania, or I don't know. It appears as though from the Tanzania side, only the kits that were put to test the Kenyan drivers were the ones that were actually working excellently, but the ones that were testing Tanzanians inside Tanzania were faulty, all of them. And, they're not working, or rather, all Tanzanians are doing very well. I don't understand the situation with COVID-19 and how President, Magufuli has been handling this matter in Tanzania has raised a lot of questions. So, of course, this report that they've closed down, all the facilities, and right now the country does not have any COVID-19 patients. We cannot buy that. We cannot. So they're saying only, I don't know how many patients are remaining right now there in Tanzania. Well, the government ceased, to do even the test. Since I think the last test that was done was around 20th or 22nd of April. So I don't know from where and from what grounds does the government of Tanzania decide now we don't have any more cases of COVID-19. Let's now close the centers that were designated to handle this matter because Tanzania is COVID-19 free. I don't understand. All right. But the other issue in Uganda, we've seen a lot of presidential aspirants now have joined the race for the 2021 election, and that list continues to grow. They want to replace President Yoweri Museveni there, and if you know the plans that are undergoing according to the Electoral Commission there in Uganda had said because of the threat that COVID-19 poses, there will be no political rallies where people physically attend. So what the aspirants are expected to do, therefore, is have virtual campaigns. By virtual campaigns, the president meant you can use, the media houses, or you can use social media. And we know these two tools, the media and the virtual, and the social media, we know how much the government, sort of controls, and it will be very difficult. I don't know. I wish I could get somebody from Uganda to ask how many advertisements do the opposition get to run, say in the national broadcast. So that is something that will impede on, any efforts by the opposition to try to reach out to their supporters, because we know Ugandan media is greatly controlled by the state. That is the fact. So these virtual campaigns is just bogus. I'll just call them for what it is. This is just, I don't know how you do this. If it was a place where there's a level playing ground, then that will make a lot of sense. But we know that is not the case in Uganda, so I don't know. And what has really caught my attention is the increased number of former army generals who are joining this list and wants to replace President Yoweri Museveni. I don't know, if I was President Yoweri Museveni, I would be worried. Because look here, Mugisha Muntu, he was a former army commander, Major General Mugisha Muntu, and then we have another one who was a former spy chief, especially the spy chief. I think if I was President Yoweri Museveni, that would worry me. This is a person who knows all the secrets about my government. That is Lieutenant General Henry Tumukunde. He's also joined that list, and also Charles Romoshana, a former operative at the Internal Security Organization. Look at that. These are very sensitive offices in a government, and these offices or these titles, these are people who have very, they have the secrets from the states, because these are very sensitive offices in any government. So we've seen they have resigned and now they want to come and they're running for the presidency of Uganda. I don't know. President Yoweri Museveni there. Perhaps it's another army general that can replace him, as it appears, because President Museveni is very much militarized. So perhaps another military man who has perhaps could bring in other military tactics, I don't know, will replace him, because it appears our civilian has not been working very much. And by this, very well, by this I mean the long-suffering opposition leader there, Kizza Besigye. He has made so many tries in wanting to replace President Yoweri Museveni, and now we see this has gained a lot of we see a lot of army generals coming in and wanting to replace President Museveni. If I was the president, I will be very worried. I think Kenya, we've not seen that. We've not seen any former army general wanting to come and even join politics, unless they're called into and they're given responsibilities, like we see now in the Nairobi Metropolitan Service unit, where President Uhuru Kenyatta brought in an army general and gave him a specific mandate to regenerate and to rebuild and to help bring back the glory of Nairobi. And he's been doing just that, and very quietly. I like that he's not in the media all the time. I think Kenyans love that. So he gets to work, and the work that he is doing speaks for itself. So to see that Uganda, there's a lot of these aspirants, ex-army generals, that is, if I was Museveni and my former chief of spy is coming in to run against me, this is somebody who knows up to the, under my bedroom. This is somebody who understands state secrets and can use that, for its own, for his own advantage. So I would be a very worried person. But of course, the virtual campaigns might not work very well for them, because President Museveni will ensure that perhaps they don't get as much airtime as probably him, because that is the truth in the ground there in Tanzania. Now, in Uganda? Now, can we talk about this meeting that President Paul Biya of Cameroon had with Ambazonian leaders on Thursday night? Of course, we know that about 10 others of Ambazonian leaders were meted with a life sentence sometimes back last year, and and they were tried in a military court, martial court. That shouldn't be the case. Martial court tries the people in the disciplined forces, the men in uniform that we saw. These people were tried. The Ambazonian leaders were tried in the military court, and of course the case was heard late into the night, and the ruling was made in the wee hours of the morning, very awkward hours that President Paul Biya and his government chose that will be the right time to make these rulings. And of course, these leaders of the Anglophones, of course, they were meted with a life sentence there. So now what is very interesting here is that there has been an increased insecurity in the Anglophone region, and there has increased fight between the government forces and, of course, the Ambazonian separatist movement there, who are increasingly agitating to be, allowed to have a referendum and to have their own country where they can just continue with their lives, because they feel like under President Paul Biya there of Cameroon, they're being treated as, second-class citizens there. And I think their plight is the same. Their situation is quite similar to that of people from the southern part of Cameroon, that is Biafra, but a bit different, because for Anglophones, especially, the renewed fight started about 3 years ago, about 4 years ago, when the government was insisting that French was to be the language that was to be taught in schools and to be used in courts and all that. And we know the Anglophone part of Cameroon, they use English. That's why they're Anglophone. So that spiked and started, another war that now has gone on, and we've seen villages have been burnt down. We've seen schools, have been closed, and the people and the children from the Anglophone region have not been able to go to schools, and a lot of people are internally displaced who now have run away from their villages because of the insecurities now, to see the government meeting up. And last year, end of September there was a meeting of what President Paul Biya called the National Dialogue. And in this National Dialogue, he was trying to find out a solution and find a lasting peace between, the government, his government, and also the people from the Anglophone region. But what lacked in this National Dialogue, which was very shambolic, by the way, is the leadership of the people of Anglophone, who was supposed to be on the table and say their piece and say, this is what we want, and this is how we want it, or this is the problem we have with the government, or this is something that if perhaps could be solved, then perhaps this will be might solve a part of our problems that we're having with the presidency there and the government of Paul Biya. So the leadership that has been agitating for this secession, the leadership that has been wanting this change, these people were already jailed lifetime. So these conversations, so this national dialogue, what happened in the absence of very important stakeholders there. So that's why it was called shambolic, and even the international community came and really were not very happy with this national dialogue that Paul Biya had. And so the meeting comes following continuous pressure from the United Nations and the international community on the Yaoundé regime and the Amazonian fighters to call for a ceasefire as the world continues to battle, of course, with COVID-19. And we know the statistics and the news that we've been receiving from that part of Cameroon is that even there, of course, the health centers there, if they're not burnt down, but they're closed because nobody is there really, and they don't have even qualified staffs right now because of the insecurity that has been happening. A lot of people have vacated, even the place, and so they don't have even qualified personnel, health personnel, to be there and help them during this COVID-19 time. And there has been a lot of increased pressure by the United Nations and also international community, who has come out and castigated President Paul Biya there of Cameroon to try to find a lasting solution, a peaceful solution, and try to be more, just pay attention to the plights and try to avert an increased level of a humanitarian crisis there that has continued, at the Anglophone region there in Amazonia. And as I said, I know the situation between the Anglophone region there in Cameroon and the Biafra land, the southern part of Nigeria, is similar, except in Amazonia, it started from a language problem, but it's deeper than that, all right? And of course, Biafrans also have a similar, plight. They're also looking for independence for their own country because they also feel as though they're being treated like second-class citizens in a country that should be theirs. So now they're feeling, if you cannot treat us right, if you cannot give us the same, treatment as the rest of the country, then why do you have to keep holding us? I think it's about time to, have a sleeve or something like that. So thank you so much. Keep writing. Keep writing and let me know what you make of this. All right, Wako Watson. we are not from the Anglophone part of Cameroon. We're just looking at the matters as they are. If you're not very familiar with what is happening right now in Cameroon, Anglophones have been agitating for secession. And last year, did you see the national dialogue that supposedly happened there in Yaoundé? That was shambolic. If at all President Paul Biya was honest and actually genuine in finding a solution, he would have invited all especially the leaders of the Anglophone, to come to the table and find a lasting solution together, because they are the leaders of this agitation. So if you leave them out, what kind of solution do you think you're going to come out with? And even after that meeting there, the national dialogue, we've seen hostilities continue. We've seen people continue leaving their homes. We've seen a lot of lives being lost there. And if you go by the United Nations, figures, so many people have died due to that conflict that exists over there. So what we're talking about, Wako Matson, is facts. What is happening there in the Anglophone region in Cameroon, and the conflict that has existed between the Anglophone region and the government of President Paul Biya. All right. But thank you so much there for watching. And now we move to where? We move to Nigeria, where Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has said the government will avenge the attack of a United Nations helicopter in which 2 people have died. Now, the president described the attack in the northeastern state of Borno as a dastardly that will not go away without severe consequences. The local media there has reported now a 5-year-old child and 2 others were among those killed in attack on Saturday, attributed to insurgents in the restive northeastern region. I don't know why they keep calling it insurgents. I don't know why they keep calling it sometimes bandits. Let's call them for what they are. This Boko Haram is a terrorist group. Boko Haram is, let's just call them for what they are. These are terrorist group that are out there to claim lives, that are out there to advance a certain ideological, thinking, and it is based on ideology, Boko Haram. So this is something that is just out of order, and let's call it for what it is, and for the damage and the ravage that it is causing, not just in Nigeria but in other African countries. So until we really identify it for what it is and the damage that it has brought, not only to Nigeria but to the rest of other African countries that have been greatly affected, and this insecurity has spread, then perhaps we may not be able to address this matter as we should. But we see there over the weekend they attacked a United Nations helicopter, and President Buhari has come out and said, you know what, we shall avenge this, and those people who have committed this act will face severe consequences. President Buhari, we've seen Boko Haram kill Nigerians there in huge numbers. We've seen Boko Haram take over a side of a country. We've seen Boko Haram manning a whole highways, in the northern part there of Nigeria. But we've not seen you come out and give very distant warning to Boko Haram. And now they've shot down the UN helicopter, and you're coming out and saying they will not get away with it. They will face severe consequences. I don't know. For them to even have thought that they will do this, that is because these are things that happens every day. They're used to killings. They're used to spreading the insecurity. They're used to killing even innocent Nigerians there, and other parts of Africa, countries like Niger, Mali, Chad, Burkina Faso, Cameroon itself. They've all suffered from the hands of Boko Haram because it has spread like that. And it continues to grow, and its mother place, is Nigeria, and the lack of seriousness by the authorities in Nigeria is what has given Boko Haram the strength that it has today. All right, so they kill people every day. Bombs go off every day in parts of Nigeria. But I've not seen President Boko Haram come out now very strongly as he has, because now it is a United Nations helicopter which has been brought down that ended up killing a child and 2 more people there. So now it is serious because it is a United Nations helicopter. I don't care what helicopter that was. The fact that Boko Haram keeps killing, people there, that should be reason enough, President Buhari, for you to take this thing seriously. did it have to take a helicopter, United Nations helicopter there, for you to realize that you need to take severe action against Boko Haram? And anyway, these severe consequences that President Buhari is spelling on Boko Haram there, I don't know. We shall see where, if at all, what other measures President Buhari will take there. So, very interesting there. APOB Western Cape, you're saying, all right, I will not. Isosa Erun Idaho, you're saying Boko Haram is a terrorist group of the tribe in Nigeria and Africa. And Dominic Nord, you're saying National Bank of Nigeria has devalued their money to 5.3%. It is a shame to the government. Okay, so keep writing. And Ernest Mokom, you're saying not just a cause has ever failed. We Ambazonians are freeing ourselves from. All right, there you go. So you can answer Wako Watson, who wonders what is the interest we have there in Cameroon. Look, we're just reporting the facts, Mr. Who is this person, Wako Watson? All right, we're just looking at the facts. And if you went and Googled and find out the information that comes from that side, the Anglophone region, and the conflict that has gone on for years between the Anglophones and the government of President Paul Biya, then you'll just report the same things that I'm reporting right now. All right, nothing I'm saying is out of order. Kiptanui Savania, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for watching. I know you're watching us from Nakuru, if I'm not very wrong. And let me see who else here. All right, now you keep writing, and we look at, of course, President Uhuru Kenyatta earlier in the afternoon announced a phased reopening of the country amid a rising number of coronavirus infections. This is a conversation that I shall have tomorrow with Dr. David Matsanga, because I know he was against President Uhuru Kenyatta's reopening. In fact, we had this conversation yesterday early in the morning, and he was saying, his famous line now, open to go where? And we've seen President Kenyatta has said we are opening anyways, and there are some protocols that have been put in place to ensure, even as the country opens and the economy opens, there are some protocols to be followed to ensure that we don't encourage the further spread of COVID-19. And the local flights in the country will resume on the 15th of July, and the international flights will resume on the 1st of August. But he gave a stand warning, and he said, should the cases continue to worsen, then we shall revert to those measures and those restrictions that have been in place for the last couple of months. So I think it's a very good news to some Kenyans who are stuck in the villages. I know a friend of mine has been there for nearly 4 months now. So I think it will be a good time for the family to come back to the city. But we have to observe these protocols that have been put in place by the government. So anyway, Nigeria there, we've looked at that. President Buhari saying he'll those who brought down that plane by the United Nations will face severe consequences. I wish he would be saying this every time Boko Haram bombs off some innocent Nigerians somewhere, because we've seen Boko Haram cause mayhem, and President Buhari has been very quiet when a lot of these things happen. And now all of a sudden, because it is a United Nations helicopter, now he comes up and says these people will face severe consequences, while we have people dying in Nigeria every single day. And President Buhari a lot of times just chooses to be quiet and do very little, if nothing at all. And we see the transitional government in Sudan has fired the police chief and his deputy. Now we are seeing here we shall have a problem, because there has been a tussle over leadership between the uniformed side and the civilian side there in Sudan, and by Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok coming out and firing the police chief and the deputy there, I think goes to show the deep distrust between the civilian side and the police side also, who oversaw the killings of a lot of Sudanese last year during the protest there. And so I don't know if this shows a deeper crisis there in Sudan, or will this just mark a new leadership in the police force, because the police force has been involved in the brutal attacks of the protesters for the past years, and even last year, leading to the ousting of former President Mar al-Bashir there. So no reasons were given for the firing of these officials. There has been a leadership tussle there with the civilian side led by Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok, wanting to show that is in control, but the military also has been trying to play checkmate with Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok. But I'm just, because they are together in a transitional period that should last another 3 years. I think 1 year is now done, so they have another 2 years to go. And so for them to just come together and work out a plan and a way and a roadmap towards finally having a democratic Sudan there. So it is quite a delicate time there in Sudan, and so we are just praying for them. We don't want any more wars erupting in this continent. We have enough that we are dealing with, so we don't want to keep fighting off these fires. So if they can work out a transition without seeing any more lives or any innocent bloodshed there for the people of Sudan, that will be the right way to go. What other place? Did we look at South Sudan? I think we did. And we've seen a corruption scandal involving top government officials in Zimbabwe, threatening to derail Zimbabwe's response to coronavirus pandemic. So apparently, there is this Dubai-based company called Drugs Consultant. It was given a contract worth $60 million for medical supplies for fight against COVID-19. So now what is happening is, apparently, the goods, it supplied the government by more than 500,000. Like it overpriced this medication and these equipments and these medical supplies to Zimbabwe. Like, in your right mind, how do you overprice anything for a country like Zimbabwe? Just looking at it from a humanitarian, point of view, how do you overprice something so vital, something so important when going to Zimbabwe, when you understand this country is already on its financial needs, cannot even meet the basic treatment for its citizens, and now we see the numbers there. I'm glad they're not as high, but they keep increasing every day, slowly. And then you're given a tender to supply, and then you overcharge Zimbabwe. Are you out of your mind? But what really struck me is that this company that was given this tender, the owner is a very close friend with the son of President Emerson Mnangagwa. See, now that's not even nice. That is not nice at all, President Mnangagwa. This is something that you have to clear. This is not okay. It's not okay. So the local representative of the company, who is also a close associate of one of President Mnangagwa's sons, has been charged after it emerged that Interpol was investigating the firm for money laundering after it received $2 million payment from the Zimbabwean government. See, that is something that President Mnangagwa, you have to clear up. So this has been Diaspora Dispatches. Thank you so much. I shall see you here tomorrow again, 3 p.m. East African time. I hope Dr. Matsanga shall be there tomorrow. My name is Miriam Ogutu. A very good afternoon to you.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.